The cold barrel of the revolver pressed against Katherine Hill's temple as her brother Jasper dragged her through the muddy street toward Willow Creek's only saloon. It was 1875, and in the Colorado Territory, a man's word was law, especially when that man was the only family you had left in the world. "You've been nothing but a burden since Ma and Pa died," Jasper hissed, his fingers digging into her arm. "Time you earned your keep." Katherine's heart hammered against her ribs as she struggled against his grip. At 22, she had spent the last 3 years cooking, cleaning, and managing their small homestead while Jasper gambled away what little money they had. Now, deep in debt and desperate, he had decided his sister was just another piece of property to be bartered. "I won't go, Jasper," she said through gritted teeth, digging her heels into the mud. "You can't sell me like cattle." Her resistance earned her a sharp slap across the face that left her ears ringing. "You'll do as you're told, or I'll put a bullet in you myself." The saloon doors loomed ahead, yellow lamplight spilling onto the boardwalk. Inside, rough men's voices mingled with tinny piano music. Katherine knew what awaited her. She'd heard the whispers about girls from failed homesteads, sold to saloon owners or worse. She'd rather die than face such a fate. As they reached the steps, the batwing doors swung open. A tall figure emerged, silhouetted against the light. The stranger paused, taking in the scene before him Jasper, wild-eyed and reeking of whiskey, dragging a struggling young woman with a reddened cheek and terror in her eyes. "Evening," the man said, his voice low and measured. He stepped fully into view, and Katherine found herself looking up at a cowboy unlike any she'd seen before. Tall and broad-shouldered, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to assess everything in an instant. His dark clothing was dusty from the trail, but of good quality. A star-shaped badge glinted on his vest. "Mind your business, mister," Jasper snarled, tightening his grip on Katherine's arm. The stranger's gaze shifted to Katherine, then back to Jasper. "When a man drags a frightened woman at gunpoint, it becomes my business." He tipped his hat slightly. "Owen Zimmerman, U.S. Marshal." Katherine felt a flicker of hope. A lawman, Jasper's face paled slightly, but desperation made him bold. "This here's family business. My sister's been nothing but trouble, and I'm taking her to meet a business associate who's interested in her services." "Is that right?" Marshal Zimmerman's voice remained calm, but his eyes hardened. He looked at Katherine. "Is that what you want, miss?" "No," Katherine answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "He means to sell me like property." The marshal's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I don't believe that's legal in this territory, friend." Jasper shoved the barrel of his gun harder against Katherine's temple. "Law don't mean much out here, Marshal. Now step aside. My debts need paying, and she's all I got left." A crowd had begun to gather at the commotion, shadowy figures watching from the boardwalk and saloon entrance. Katherine could feel her chances slipping away with each passing moment. If Jasper got her inside that saloon, not even a U.S. Marshal could help her. Marshal Zimmerman seemed to consider the situation, his hand hovering near his holster. "How much?" "What?" Jasper asked, momentarily confused. "How much are you selling her for? What's the debt?" Jasper's eyes narrowed suspiciously. $200. The marshal nodded slowly. "I'll give you 300, right now." A stunned silence fell over the onlookers. Katherine stared at the marshal in disbelief. "What kind of game are you playing?" Jasper demanded. "No game," Marshal Zimmerman replied. "I'm claiming her as my bride instead." Katherine's breath caught in her throat. From property to bride in an instant, was this any better than what Jasper had planned? The marshal continued, his voice carrying for all to hear. $300, and she walks away with me legally wed, no law against a man taking a wife. He reached into his vest and produced a thick envelope. "Cash, right now." Jasper's grip on Katherine loosened slightly as greed battled with suspicion. "Why would you want her? You don't even know her." "I know she deserves better than being sold to a saloon," the marshal replied evenly. "And I know a good woman when I see one." Katherine's mind raced. Marriage to a stranger, a lawman she'd just met, or being sold to whoever waited inside the saloon. Neither was the future she dreamed of, but only one offered a chance at dignity. "Marshal," she said softly, meeting his gaze. "If I agree to this, you must promise to treat me as a wife, not property." Something flickered in his eyes, respect, perhaps. "You have my word." Jasper's gaze fixed on the envelope. How do I know that's real money? Marshal Zimmerman opened the envelope, displaying the bills inside. Count it if you like. Greed won out. Jasper released Catherine's arm and snatched the envelope, thumbing through the bills with eager fingers. Fine, she's yours, good riddance. We'll need to make it official, the marshal said, Judge Porter still keeping office above the general store. A man from the crowd nodded. He's there till 8 most nights. Then let's not waste time, Marshal Zimmerman said, offering his arm to Katherine. Miss Hill, Katherine hesitated only a moment before taking it, her fingers trembling against the rough fabric of his coat. As they walked away, she heard Jasper's voice behind them. You got yourself a bad bargain, Marshal. She's stubborn as a mule and twice as ornery. The marshal didn't look back, but Katherine felt his arm tense under her fingers. Are you all right, Miss Hill? He asked quietly. No, she answered honestly, but I will be. They walked in silence to the general store, followed by a small procession of curious townsfolk. The news of a U.S. Marshal buying a bride had spread quickly through Willow Creek. Katherine struggled to process everything that had happened in the past hour. This morning, she had been making bread and mending clothes in the small cabin she shared with Jasper. Now, she was about to marry a complete stranger to escape being sold into a life she couldn't bear to contemplate. As they climbed the stairs to Judge Porter's office, Marshal Zimmerman paused. Miss Hill, I want you to understand something. This marriage will be real in the eyes of the law, but I don't expect. He cleared his throat. What I mean to say is, I didn't do this to acquire that is. Despite everything, Katherine almost smiled at his discomfort. You didn't buy yourself a bedmate, is that what you're trying to say, Marshal? His face reddened slightly. Yes, madam, that's exactly it. I saw a woman in trouble and this seemed the fastest way to help, nothing more. Then why marriage? Why not simply arrest my brother? For what? Being a scoundrel isn't illegal, unfortunately, and even if I locked him up, he'd have legal rights to you still as your guardian, this way. He trailed off. This way I belong to you instead, Katherine finished. His expression hardened. No, this way you belong to yourself with my name as protection, that's all. Before she could respond, the door opened, revealing Judge Porter, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose. Marshal Zimmerman, heard you were coming, and this must be the bride. His eyes moved curiously over Katherine. Judge Porter, the marshal acknowledged. We'd like to get this done quickly if you don't mind. The ceremony that followed was brief and devoid of sentiment. Katherine spoke her vows in a clear voice, determined not to show fear or uncertainty before the crowd that had gathered to witness the unusual wedding. Marshal Zimmerman Owen, she reminded herself, spoke his part with the same calm authority he displayed in confronting Jasper. When Judge Porter pronounced them husband and wife, Owen took a simple gold band from his pocket and slipped it onto Katherine's finger. The metal was warm, as if he'd been holding it tightly. Belonged to my mother, he said quietly. Always carry it with me for luck. The unexpected sentiment caught Katherine off guard. This man was full of contradictions, paying a small fortune to save a stranger, carrying his mother's ring in his pocket, marrying a woman he'd just met with no expectation of the usual marital rights. As they stepped outside, the townspeople offered awkward congratulations. Katherine noticed Owen scanning the street, his posture alert. He's gone, a shopkeeper called out. Your brother-in-law headed straight for the gambling hall after you left. Owen nodded, then turned to Katherine. I've got a room at the hotel. You can stay there tonight. I'll bunk with the sheriff. Is that appropriate, Marshal? We're married now after all. The words came out more challenging than she'd intended. Owen, he corrected. And proper or not, I meant what I said. This arrangement is for your protection, nothing more. He offered his arm again. Shall we? The hotel was modest but clean, with actual glass in the windows and real beds instead of straw pallets. The proprietor, a plump woman named Mrs. Fulton, seemed disappointed when Owen requested separate accommodations. First night as newlyweds and you're sleeping at the jail, she clucked, handing Katherine the key. Strange times we're living in. Once alone in the room, Katherine sat on the edge of the bed, running her finger over the gold band. Everything had happened so quickly that she'd barely had time to think. Now, in the quiet, the enormity of it all crashed over her. She was married to a man she didn't know. She had escaped one form of ownership only to enter another, regardless of Owen's assurances. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Opening the door, she found Mrs. Fulton holding a tray with a steaming bowl of stew and fresh bread. "Thought you might be hungry, dearie," the woman said, bustling into the room. "Not the wedding supper you might have dreamed of, but it's hot and filling." "Thank you," Catherine said, realizing she hadn't eaten since morning. "That's very kind." Mrs. Fulton set down the tray and lingered, curiosity evident in her eyes. "Quite the day you've had. The whole town's talking about how the marshal saved you from your no-good brother," Catherine tensed. "I'd rather not discuss it, if you don't mind." Of course," Mrs. Fulton said, though she made no move to leave. "It's just, well, Marshal Zimmerman's been through here before, tracking outlaws and such. Always seemed the solitary type. Never would have pegged him for the marrying kind, especially not so suddenly." "Life is full of surprises," Catherine replied, moving toward the door in a not-so-subtle hint. "That it is," Mrs. Fulton agreed, finally taking the cue. "Well, you enjoy that stew, and if you need anything else, just ring the bell." After the woman left, Catherine ate slowly, savoring the simple meal. The stew was rich with vegetables and tender beef, better than anything she'd managed to cook in the past months as their supplies dwindled. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to consider that perhaps this bizarre turn of events might have some advantages. She had just finished eating when another knock came at the door. This time, it was Owen, his hat in his hands and a saddlebag over his shoulder. "Brought you some things," he said, placing the bag on the bed. "Stopped by the general store, nothing fancy, just necessities." Catherine opened the bag to find a nightgown, a simple dress, undergarments, a hairbrush, and toiletries. The thoughtfulness of it brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she said, quickly blinking them away. "That was considerate." Owen nodded, clearly uncomfortable with her emotion. "I'll be leaving at first light. Got word that the Harmon gang was spotted near Silver Ridge." "Leaving?" Catherine repeated, a flutter of panic rising in her chest. "What about?" She gestured vaguely between them. "I've arranged for you to stay here for the week," he explained. "Mrs. Fulton will look after you. By the time I get back, we can figure out a more permanent arrangement." "And if you don't come back?" Catherine asked, voicing the reality of a lawman's life in the territories. Owen's expression remained steady. "Then you'll be a widow with a marshal's pension. Better than what you had before, I reckon." The blunt assessment was oddly comforting in its honesty. "Yes," she agreed. "Better than before." He shifted his weight, seemingly unsure of what to say next. "I'll stop by in the morning before I go. Get some rest, Catherine." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something about the way he said it made her breath catch. "Good night, Owen." After he left, Catherine changed into the new nightgown and slipped under the covers. The bed was softer than anything she'd slept on in years. As she drifted toward sleep, she wondered what strange twist of fate had brought Owen Zimmerman to those saloon doors at precisely the moment she needed saving, and more unsettling still, she wondered why the thought of him not returning filled her with such unexpected dread. Dawn had barely broken when Catherine awoke to another knock. She dressed quickly in the new clothes. Owen had purchased a simple blue calico dress that fit her surprisingly well and opened the door to find him already dressed for the trail. "Morning," he said, hat in hand again. "Didn't mean to wake you so early." "I'm used to early mornings," she replied, stepping back to let him enter. "On a homestead, the work starts before the sun." Owen nodded, remaining near the door. "I've left money with Mrs. Fulton for your room and board. Should be enough for a couple of weeks, though I hope to be back sooner." "Thank you," Catherine said, smoothing her skirt nervously. "I don't quite know what to say. You've done so much and we're still strangers." "Not strangers," he corrected. "We're legally married, even if the circumstances are unusual." An awkward silence fell between them. Catherine had so many questions about him, about what would happen when he returned, about what kind of life she could expect as the wife of a U.S. Marshal. But before she could voice any of them, Owen reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. "Almost forgot. Had Judge Porter draw this up last night." He handed it to her. "It's a marriage certificate, makes everything official. And this," he produced another paper, "gives you authority to access my bank account in Denver should you need it." Catherine took the papers, astonished. "You trust me with your money, you don't even know me." "I know enough," he said simply. "You're my wife now, on paper at least. That means something to me, even if the circumstances are unconventional." The word wife still felt foreign to her ears. Yesterday, she had been Katherine Hill, a burden to her brother. Today, she was Katherine Zimmerman, married to a man who had spent $300 to save her from a fate worse than death, only to ride away on a dangerous mission hours later. "Be careful," she found herself saying. "I'd hate for my first experience as a wife to be that of a widow." A small smile touched his lips. "I'll do my best to disappoint you on that count." He put his hat on and moved toward the door. "I should be back within the week. If I'm delayed, I'll send word." Katherine nodded, suddenly not trusting her voice. This man was still a stranger, yet the thought of him facing danger bothered her more than it should. At the door, Owen paused. "Katherine," he said, his voice softer than before, "I want you to know that when I return, we'll talk about the future. This doesn't have to be permanent if it's not what you want. I can arrange for an annulment, set you up somewhere safe." The offer should have been a relief, but instead it stirred an unexpected feeling of rejection. "I understand," she said stiffly. "You never wanted a wife." "That's not what I meant," he replied, looking genuinely concerned. "I just don't want you to feel trapped. You had no choice yesterday. I want you to have one now." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Katherine moved to the window and watched as Owen crossed the street to where his horse was tethered. He mounted with the ease of a man who'd spent most of his life in the saddle, checked his guns, and then, as if sensing her gaze, looked up at her window. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance. He raised his hand in a small salute, then turned his horse and rode out of town, the morning sun casting his shadow long on the dusty street. As she watched him disappear, Katherine realized that for the first time in years, she was truly alone, not lonely, as she had been under Jasper's cruel oversight, but independent. She had a roof over her head, money for food, and the protection of a respected lawman's name. It was more than she had dared hope for yesterday. Yet as she turned from the window, twisting the gold band on her finger, she couldn't help but wonder what would happen when Owen Zimmerman returned, and they had to decide what kind of marriage theirs would truly be. The days passed slowly in Willow Creek. Katherine quickly discovered that being the marshal's wife granted her a level of respect she'd never experienced before. Shopkeepers who had previously ignored her now greeted her warmly. Women who had once looked through her now invited her to join their sewing circle. Mrs. Fulton proved to be both a help and a hindrance. She took Katherine under her wing, introducing her around town and making sure she had everything she needed, but her constant questions about the hasty marriage tested Katherine's patience. "How did you and the Marshal meet?" she asked on the third day as they sat in the hotel dining room. "It's a rather private matter," Katherine replied, focusing on her tea. "But surely there's no harm in sharing a little romantic tale," Mrs. Fulton pressed. "The girls in town are simply dying to know how he courted you." Katherine considered fabricating a story but decided on a version of the truth instead. "He saved me from a difficult situation. I suppose you could say he was quite gallant about it." Mrs. Fulton sighed dreamily. "I knew it. Those quiet types are always the most romantic at heart." Katherine didn't correct her. Let the town think what they wanted. The reality was complicated enough without trying to explain it. On the fourth day, Katherine encountered Jasper outside the general store. He was disheveled, clearly having spent his newfound wealth on whiskey and gambling. "Well, if it ain't Mrs. Marshall," he sneered, blocking her path. "How's married life treating you, sister? Better than living with your own blood, I reckon." Katherine straightened her spine. "Much better, yes. Now please step aside, Jasper." He leaned closer, his breath sour. "He'll tire of you soon enough. Men like that don't settle for plain girls like you. When he does, don't come crawling back." "I wouldn't dream of it," Katherine replied coldly. "You're no longer my family, Jasper. You made that clear when you put a price on me." His face darkened, and for a moment Katherine feared he might strike her in public. But then Mr. Turner, the storekeeper, emerged from his shop. "Everything all right, Mrs. Zimmerman?" he called, eyeing Jasper with suspicion. Katherine nodded. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Turner." "I was just leaving." Jasper spat on the ground near her feet. "This ain't over," he muttered before stalking away toward the saloon. The encounter left Katherine shaken. Despite her brave words, she knew Jasper could be dangerous when drunk and angry. For the first time since Owen's departure, she felt truly vulnerable. That night, she found it difficult to sleep, starting at every noise outside her window. What if Jasper decided to take his revenge? What if he came for her, determined to reclaim what he saw as his property? Owen had left her with money but no way to defend herself. By the 6th day, with no word from Owen, Catherine's anxiety had grown. She took to carrying a small knife in her pocket, borrowed from the hotel kitchen. It wasn't much, but it made her feel less helpless. She was returning from the general store when she noticed a stranger watching her from across the street, a tall man with a weathered face and a star on his chest similar to Owen's. When their eyes met, he tipped his hat and approached. "Mrs. Zimmerman." He asked, his voice gravelly but respectful. Katherine nodded, wary. "Yes, and you are Deputy Marshal Frank Donovan," he introduced himself. "Rode in with news from your husband." Her heart skipped. "Is he all right?" "He's fine, madam. The Harmon gang was bigger than expected. They're holed up in an abandoned mine near Silver Ridge. Owen asked me to tell you he'll be delayed another week or so." Relief washed over her, followed quickly by concern. "Is it dangerous?" Deputy Donovan's hesitation told her everything. "Marshal Zimmerman can handle himself, madam. He's one of the best." "Of course," Katherine said, trying to hide her worry. "Thank you for bringing word." "There's one more thing," Donovan added. "Owen asked me to stay in town a few days, keep an eye on things." His gaze shifted briefly toward the saloon, where Jasper had taken up near permanent residence. Katherine understood immediately. Owen had anticipated her brother might cause trouble. "That's very considerate of my husband," she said, the words still strange on her tongue. Deputy Donovan nodded. "He mentioned your brother might be unhappy with the current arrangement." "That's putting it mildly," Katherine replied with a wry smile, "but I can manage." "I'm sure you can, madam, but I'll be around just the same." True to his word, Deputy Donovan remained in Willow Creek, his presence a visible deterrent to whatever schemes Jasper might have been hatching. Katherine often spotted him patrolling the streets or sitting on the hotel porch, keeping a watchful eye on the town. On the 10th day after Owen's departure, Katherine received an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Fulton knocked on her door just after breakfast, her round face flushed with excitement. "There's a lady asking for you downstairs," she announced. "Says she's an old friend of the Marshals." Quite the elegant woman, too. Curious, Katherine followed Mrs. Fulton to the hotel lobby, where a striking woman in a fashionable traveling suit stood examining a painting on the wall. She turned as Katherine approached, revealing a beautiful face framed by auburn hair. "Mrs. Zimmerman," she said, her voice cultured and smooth. "How lovely to finally meet you. I'm Vivian Parker, an old acquaintance of your husband's." Something in the way she emphasized acquaintance made Katherine immediately wary. "Miss Parker, what brings you to Willow Creek?" "I was passing through on my way to Denver when I heard the most astonishing news that Owen Zimmerman had taken a wife." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I simply had to meet the woman who managed to capture his heart." "I see," Katherine replied, uncomfortable under the woman's scrutiny. "Well, I'm afraid Owen isn't here at present. He's away on business." "Yes, chasing outlaws as usual," Vivian said with a dismissive wave. "Some things never change. Perhaps we could take tea together. I'd love to hear how you two met." Before Katherine could formulate a polite refusal, Mrs. Fulton eagerly offered to serve them in the hotel's small parlor. Trapped, Katherine found herself seated across from Vivian, who removed her gloves with deliberate grace. "I must admit," Vivian began once they were alone, "I was quite surprised by the news. Owen and I were close not 6 months ago in Denver. He never mentioned any intention to marry." Katherine's stomach tightened. "I believe some decisions in life take us by surprise." Vivian's laugh was like glass breaking. "How diplomatic. But let's be honest with each other, shall we? I know Owen. He's not the impulsive type, especially regarding matrimony." She leaned forward. "So I can't help but wonder what exactly transpired to result in this hasty union." "I don't believe that's any of your concern, Miss Parker," Katherine replied, keeping her voice steady despite her discomfort. "Perhaps not," Vivian conceded, stirring her tea. "But I find it curious that a man who once told me he had no interest in settling down would suddenly marry a—" Her eyes swept over Katherine's simple dress. A country girl from a nowhere town. The implication stung, but Katherine refused to show it. "People change, Miss Parker. Their priorities shift." "Indeed they do," Vivian agreed with a cold smile. "But Owen Zimmerman, the man lives for the hunt." The thrill of tracking outlaws across the territory, a wife would only complicate that life. She set down her teacup. Unless, of course, the marriage serves some other purpose. Katherine felt her face grow hot. This woman was too perceptive by half. I'm not sure what you're implying. I think you know exactly what I'm implying, Vivian replied. Whatever arrangement you have with Owen, I doubt very much it's a love match. She reached across the table and patted Katherine's hand with false sympathy. Don't take it too hard, dear. Owen has always had a soft spot for damsels in distress. He'll play the gallant hero, then move on when the novelty wears off. Before Katherine could respond, the parlor door opened and Deputy Donovan appeared. Mrs. Zimmerman, he said, nodding respectfully. Just checking if you needed anything. The interruption gave Katherine a moment to compose herself. Actually, Deputy, Miss Parker was just leaving. She has a long journey ahead to Denver. Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly, but she recovered quickly. Yes, I really should be on my way. She rose, collecting her gloves. It was illuminating to meet you, Mrs. Zimmerman. Do give my regards to your husband when he returns. After Vivian departed, Katherine remained in the parlor, her tea growing cold as she pondered the woman's words. Was Owen known for rescuing women in distress? Was their unusual marriage simply another example of his heroic tendencies, rather than the genuine concern he'd professed? And more troubling still, who had Owen Zimmerman been to Vivian Parker, and what might he still be to her? The next few days passed in a haze of uncertainty. Katherine found herself questioning everything about her hasty marriage and the man she barely knew. Vivian's visit had planted seeds of doubt that grew with each passing day. On the 14th night after Owen's departure, Katherine was awakened by the sound of breaking glass. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, as heavy footsteps stumbled across her room. Thought you could hide from me, sister. Jasper's slurred voice came from the darkness. Thought your lawman husband would keep you safe. Katherine reached for the lamp, but Jasper's hand closed around her wrist, squeezing painfully. Let go of me, she demanded, trying to keep the fear from her voice. You think you're better than me now, he growled, his whiskey-soured breath hot on her face. Prancing around town as Mrs. Marshall, you're still nothing but a burden that I got rid of. Get out, Katherine hissed, twisting in his grip. Deputy Donovan is just down the hall, Jasper laughed, a harsh sound in the darkness. Your watchdog left town this morning. Some emergency in Silver Ridge. It's just you and me now. Cold fear washed over Katherine. Deputy Donovan had indeed mentioned riding out to assist Owen, but she hadn't expected him to leave without telling her. What do you want, Jasper? She asked, her free hand searching desperately for the kitchen knife she kept beneath her pillow. What's rightfully mine, he snarled. That money, your husband cheated me, $300, you're worth at least $5 to the right buyer. Her fingers closed around the knife handle. The transaction is done. I'm married now, you have no claim on me. Marriage can be undone, Jasper replied ominously. Accidents happen all the time, especially to women alone in hotel rooms. In one swift movement, Katherine pulled the knife from beneath her pillow and slashed wildly. Jasper howled as the blade caught his arm, releasing her wrist to clutch at the wound. Katherine scrambled from the bed, still clutching the knife. Get out now, or I swear I'll scream so loud they'll hear me in Denver. You little witch, Jasper growled, advancing on her again. You'll pay for that. Katherine backed away, the knife held before her. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Jasper. You sold me. You gave up any right to call yourself my brother. He lunged suddenly, knocking the knife from her hand. It clattered to the floor as he grabbed her by the throat, shoving her against the wall. I should have done this years ago, he snarled, his fingers tightening. Katherine clawed at his hands, gasping for air. Black spots danced before her eyes as Jasper's face twisted with drunken rage. This was how she would die at the hands of the man who should have protected her, in a hotel room far from home, with a husband who might never know what happened to her. The sudden crash of the door being kicked open barely registered through her fading consciousness. There was a blur of movement. The pressure on her throat suddenly released, and she collapsed to the floor, gulping precious air. Through watering eyes, she saw two figures struggling in the darkness. A fist connected with flesh. A body hit the floor, and then silence except for heavy breathing. Katherine, the voice was achingly familiar. As her vision cleared, she saw Owen kneeling beside her, his face tight with concern. Owen, she whispered hoarsely, her bruised throat protesting. You're back. His hand gently touched her neck where Jasper's fingerprints were surely forming. I'm sorry, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I should never have left you alone. Donovan said, emergency, she managed. There was, Owen confirmed grimly. But when I heard your brother had been making threats in the saloon, I rode straight back. His gaze moved to where Jasper lay unconscious on the floor. Looks like I was almost too late. Catherine's hand found his, squeezing weakly. But you weren't. For a moment they stayed like that, hands clasped in the darkness. Then Owen helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. Can you walk? We need to get you out of here while I deal with him. She nodded, though her legs felt unsteady. Owen guided her to the door, his arm around her waist. In the hallway, a small crowd had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Fulton, Owen called to the wide-eyed hotel keeper. Would you please take my wife to your quarters? She's had a shock. Of course, Marshal, Mrs. Fulton replied, hurrying forward to take Catherine's arm. Come along, dear, you're safe now. As Mrs. Fulton led her away, Katherine glanced back to see Owen re-entering the room, his expression hard as granite. She didn't envy Jasper when he regained consciousness. In Mrs. Fulton's cozy sitting room, Katherine sipped hot tea laced with whiskey, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite the warm night. The alcohol burned her injured throat, but it helped calm her shaking hands. Your husband's back just in time, Mrs. Fulton commented, fussing with cushions. Providence, that's what it is. Katherine nodded absently, her thoughts whirling. Owen had come back for her, not for the Harmon gang, not for his duty, but because he'd heard Jasper was making threats. An hour later, Owen appeared at Mrs. Fulton's door, looking weary but composed. Your brother's locked up at the jail, he informed Katherine. He'll stand trial for attempted murder. Thank you, she said, her voice still raspy. Mrs. Fulton excused herself with remarkable tact, leaving them alone. Owen sat beside Katherine on the small sofa, keeping a respectful distance. Are you all right? He asked, his eyes searching her face. Did he hurt you anywhere else? She shook her head. Just my throat. And my pride, perhaps. You defended yourself, Owen noted, gesturing to a cut on his own hand. Found your knife on the floor, must have gotten at least one good slash in. Not good enough, Katherine replied bitterly. He still nearly killed me. But he didn't, Owen said firmly. You're stronger than you know, Katherine. The simple statement, delivered with such conviction, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She blinked them away, unwilling to appear weak after everything. Your room's been compromised, Owen continued. I've arranged for new accommodations. A small house at the edge of town. It belonged to Doc Miller before he moved to Denver. It's modest, but a house, Katherine interrupted, surprised. Not another hotel room. Owen looked slightly uncomfortable. I thought you might appreciate some privacy and security. The place has good locks and sturdy doors. That's very thoughtful, Katherine said, studying him in the lamplight. He looked different, somehow more tired, yes, but also softer around the edges, less the stern lawman and more human. Will you be staying there as well? The question hung between them, charged with implications. Owen met her gaze steadily. If you'd prefer I find other arrangements, no, Katherine said quickly, surprising herself. I mean, it's your house too, and after tonight, she touched her bruised throat. I'd feel safer with you nearby. Relief flickered across his face. Then that's settled. He stood, offering his hand. Do you think you can walk? It's not far. The house was indeed modest, 2 small bedrooms, a cozy kitchen, and a sitting room with real furniture rather than the rough-hewn pieces Katherine had grown accustomed to on the homestead. A bookshelf held actual books, and curtains framed the windows. Doc Miller's wife was particular about comfort, Owen explained, lighting lamps as they moved through the house. She insisted on bringing civilization with her to the frontier. Katherine ran her fingers along a polished side table. It's lovely. Owen showed her to the larger of the 2 bedrooms. You should get some rest, it's been a long night. As he turned to leave, Katherine spoke. Owen, wait. He paused, looking back at her. Thank you, not just for tonight, but for everything. I'm beginning to think I got the better end of our bargain. A small smile touched his lips. I wouldn't say that. His eyes lingered on her face for a moment longer than necessary before he cleared his throat. Good night, Katherine. Good night, Owen. The next morning, Katherine awoke to the smell of coffee and the sound of movement in the kitchen. For a moment, she was disoriented, the unfamiliar room confusing her sleep-addled mind. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back: Jasper's attack, Owen's timely return, the move to this house. She dressed quickly in one of the few dresses she owned, wincing as her movements pulled at the bruises on her neck. A glance in the mirror confirmed what she already knew: Jasper's fingerprints were clearly visible against her pale skin, angry purple marks that told their own story. In the kitchen, she found Owen at the small stove, his back to her as he tended to something in a pan. He'd removed his coat and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle. It was such a domestic scene that Katherine paused in the doorway, momentarily speechless. He must have sensed her presence, for he turned, spatula in hand. "Good morning. Hope I didn't wake you." "No," Katherine assured him. "The smell of coffee did that. I didn't know U.S. Marshals could cook." "We have many hidden talents," he replied with a small smile. "Though I warn you, my skills are limited to breakfast foods and coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe." Katherine moved to the stove, peering around him at the pan. "Eggs and bacon, simple but effective." "Exactly," Owen agreed. He gestured to a pot of coffee. "Help yourself, cups are in that cabinet." As they ate breakfast at the small table, Katherine found herself studying Owen when he wasn't looking. In the morning light, she could see the fatigue etched around his eyes, the stubble darkening his jaw. He'd clearly ridden hard to return to Willow Creek. "You never said what happened with the Harmon gang," she ventured. Owen swallowed a bite of eggs. "Still out there. Donovan and a few other deputies have them cornered. I left them to it when I heard about your brother." The casualness with which he admitted prioritizing her safety over his mission surprised her. "Won't you get in trouble for abandoning your post?" he shrugged. "Maybe, but some things are more important." "Like what?" she asked, genuinely curious. Owen looked at her directly, his blue eyes serious. "Like making sure my wife wasn't harmed by her drunken brother." The word wife still sent a strange flutter through Katherine's chest. "About that," she said, setting down her fork. "I met someone while you were gone." "A woman named Vivian Parker." Owen's face registered surprise, then wariness. "Vivian was here. She said she was passing through on her way to Denver," Katherine explained, watching his reaction carefully. "She seemed quite taken aback by news of your marriage." "I imagine she was," Owen muttered, pushing his plate away. "She implied that you and she were close. Recently," Owen sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Vivian and I had an understanding in Denver last winter, nothing serious or permanent." "She seemed to think otherwise," Katherine observed. "Vivian sees what she wants to see," Owen replied, his tone hardening slightly. "We parted ways months ago, by mutual agreement." Katherine wasn't sure she believed that last part, given Vivian's obvious displeasure at finding Owen married. "She also suggested that you have a habit of rescuing women in distress, that our marriage was just another example of your heroic tendencies." Owen's jaw tightened. "Vivian doesn't know everything about me." "No," Katherine agreed softly, "neither do I." Their eyes met across the table, the air between them suddenly charged with unspoken questions. Before either could break the silence, a knock came at the door. Owen rose, his hand instinctively moving to the gun at his hip. "Stay here," he instructed, moving cautiously to the front door. Katherine heard murmured voices, then Owen returned with Deputy Donovan in tow. The deputy looked exhausted, his clothes dusty from the trail. "Mrs. Zimmerman," he greeted her with a nod. "Good to see you're all right. Heard about your brother." "Thank you for your concern, Deputy," Katherine replied. "Would you like some coffee?" "Much obliged, madam, but I can't stay." He turned to Owen. "Got news. The Harmon gang slipped past our perimeter last night. They're headed this way." Owen's expression darkened. "This way, you're sure?" Donovan nodded grimly. "One of our scouts tracked them. They're making for the border, but they'll pass within 10 miles of Willow Creek. And Owen," he lowered his voice, though Katherine could still hear him, "they know you're here. Word is they're looking to settle a score." Katherine's blood ran cold. She knew enough about Owen's work to understand what that meant. The Harmon gang was notorious for their brutality, especially toward lawmen who crossed them. Owen's face gave nothing away. "How much time do we have?" "A day, maybe less," Donovan replied. "I've got men riding to intercept them, but they've got a head start." "All right," Owen said, his voice slipping into the authoritative tone Katherine had first heard outside the saloon 2 weeks ago. "Get back to town. Alert Sheriff Taylor. We'll need every man who can handle a gun." After Donovan left, Owen turned to Katherine, his expression grim. "I need to go." "I know," she said, standing. "Do what you have to do." He studied her face as if memorizing its features. If the Harmons reach town, it could get ugly. These men have no regard for innocent life. "What should I do?" Katherine asked, refusing to give in to the fear building inside her. "Stay here. Keep the doors locked. There's a shotgun in my saddlebag. Do you know how to use one?" Katherine nodded. On the homestead, she'd often scared off coyotes and other predators. "Point and pull the trigger, not much to it." A brief smile touched Owen's lips. "There's more to it than that, but that'll do in a pinch." He moved to retrieve the weapon, showing her how to load it properly. "If anyone tries to break in who isn't me or Donovan, don't hesitate." The gravity of the situation settled over Katherine like a heavy cloak. 2 weeks ago, she had been facing a different kind of danger. Now she was preparing to defend herself from outlaws who might target her simply because she was Owen Zimmerman's wife. As Owen checked his guns and gathered his gear, Katherine watched him move with the efficiency of a man long accustomed to danger. This was who he was, not the gentle man who made her breakfast, but the lawman who tracked killers across the territory. "Owen," she said as he prepared to leave. "Be careful." He paused at the door, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I will." He hesitated, then added, "Katherine, if anything happens, don't," she interrupted. "Just come back." Their eyes held for a long moment. Then, in a movement that surprised them both, Owen crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was brief but fierce, his arms strong around her waist, her hands instinctively gripping his shoulders. When he released her, his eyes had darkened with emotion. "Bar the door behind me," he instructed, his voice rougher than before. "Don't open it for anyone but me." And then he was gone, leaving Katherine alone with a shotgun and the lingering warmth of his unexpected embrace. The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. Katherine kept herself busy cleaning the already tidy house, organizing the kitchen, anything to distract herself from the constant fear. Every distant sound made her jump: a bird landing on the roof, the wind rattling a loose shutter, the creak of the house settling. By nightfall, her nerves were stretched to the breaking point. She lit lamps in every room, unwilling to sit in darkness. The shotgun remained within arm's reach at all times. Outside, Willow Creek had gone eerily quiet. No piano music drifted from the saloon, no voices called out greetings in the street. The town was holding its breath, waiting. Katherine was heating water for tea when she heard the distant sound of gunfire. She froze, straining to listen. More shots followed, then a long silence that was somehow worse than the noise. Moving to the window, she cautiously peered out from behind the curtain. The town appeared deserted, the main street empty under the pale moonlight, but something was wrong. A flickering orange glow reflected off the buildings at the far end of town. Fire. Katherine's heart raced. Had the Harmon gang reached Willow Creek? Was Owen out there fighting them even now? The minutes ticked by with no further sounds of gunfire. The orange glow grew brighter, suggesting the fire was spreading. Katherine paced the small sitting room, torn between her promise to stay put and her growing fear that something terrible had happened. A sudden pounding at the door nearly stopped her heart. "Katherine." It was Owen's voice, urgent and strained. "Katherine, open up." She rushed to the door, fumbling with the heavy bar in her haste. As soon as she pulled it open, Owen stumbled inside, supporting another man who was clearly wounded. "Quick, help me get him to the bedroom," Owen gasped, his face streaked with soot and what looked like blood. Together they half-carried the injured man, who Katherine now recognized as Sheriff Taylor, to the spare bedroom. Blood soaked the sheriff's left side and his face was gray with pain. "What happened?" Katherine asked, already moving to get clean cloths and water. "Harmon's hit the north end of town," Owen explained tersely, cutting away the sheriff's shirt to expose the wound. "Set fire to the livery as a distraction, then opened fire from the rooftops. Taylor took a bullet meant for me." Katherine handed him clean cloths, wincing at the ugly wound in the sheriff's side. "Will he live? If we can stop the bleeding," Owen replied grimly. "Doc Miller's gone and the nearest doctor is in Silverton, 2 days' ride." I've dealt with wounds before, Katherine said, rolling up her sleeves. On the homestead, we couldn't always get to a doctor either. Owen's relief was palpable. Tell me what to do. For the next hour, they worked together to clean and bandage the sheriff's wound. The bullet had passed through his side, miraculously missing vital organs but leaving considerable damage in its wake. By the time they finished, Taylor had fallen into an uneasy sleep, his breathing shallow but steady. Katherine washed blood from her hands in a basin of water that had turned pink. He needs proper medical attention. I know, Owen agreed, looking exhausted, but we can't move him yet, and I can't leave town with the Harmons still out there. How many are there? Katherine asked, leading the way back to the kitchen. 5 that we know of, Owen replied, accepting the cup of coffee she handed him. We got 2 of them in the initial firefight, but the others escaped. And the fire, under control thanks to a bucket brigade. The livery's a loss, but they managed to save most of the horses. He took a long drink of coffee, grimacing at its bitterness. I shouldn't have come back here, but I needed somewhere safe for Taylor. You did the right thing, Katherine assured him. We can look after him. Owen studied her over the rim of his cup. You're taking this remarkably well. Katherine shrugged. I've learned to adapt quickly these past 2 weeks. Yes, you have, he agreed softly, then his expression turned serious again. I need to get back out there. Donovan and the others are searching the hills south of town, but I don't like leaving them short-handed. Go, Katherine said. I'll watch over the sheriff. Owen hesitated. The remaining Harmons are desperate men, Katherine, if they discover I'm married. She understood his unspoken fear. They might come here, I know. She picked up the shotgun. I'm not defenseless, Owen. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Keep everything locked. If you hear anything suspicious, get Taylor into the root cellar. There's a trapdoor under the rug in the pantry. A root cellar, Katherine repeated, surprised. In town, Doc Miller was a cautious man, Owen explained. Built it during the Indian troubles 10 years back. As he prepared to leave again, Katherine caught his arm. Owen, be careful, please. He covered her hand with his own. Always, Em. Then, in a gesture that seemed almost instinctive, he leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. I'll be back by dawn. The tenderness of the gesture left Katherine momentarily speechless. She watched him go, her hand rising to touch the spot where his lips had been, wondering if the growing feeling in her chest was what she thought it might be. The night stretched endlessly. Katherine checked on Sheriff Taylor regularly, changing his bandages and cooling his forehead when fever set in. Between these duties, she kept watch at the windows, shotgun ready. Sometime after midnight, the sheriff woke, confused and in pain. Zimmerman, he called weakly. He's not here, Katherine told him, helping him drink water. He's with Deputy Donovan looking for the Harmons. Taylor's bloodshot eyes focused on her face. You're his wife, the one he married so sudden-like. Yes, she confirmed, uncomfortable under his scrutiny. He's a good man, Taylor said, his voice fading. Best I know, never seen him look at a woman the way he looks at you. Katherine frowned. What do you mean? But the sheriff had already drifted back into unconsciousness, leaving her to wonder about his words. Dawn came with no sign of Owen. Katherine's anxiety grew with each passing hour. Had something happened to him? Were the remaining Harmons still out there, or had they been captured? She was changing the sheriff's bandages again when she heard the soft creak of a floorboard in the kitchen. Katherine froze, her heart pounding. Owen would have called out, identified himself. Moving silently, she retrieved the shotgun from where it leaned against the wall. The sheriff was too weak to move, so the root cellar was not an option. She would have to stand her ground. Stay quiet, she whispered to Taylor, who nodded weakly. Katherine slipped out of the bedroom, closing the door behind her. The house seemed unnaturally still, but her instincts told her someone was there. She moved cautiously down the hallway, the shotgun ready. A floorboard creaked again, closer this time. Katherine rounded the corner into the sitting room and found herself face to face with a stranger, a tall, lean man with a scar running down one cheek and cold eyes that widened in surprise at the sight of her. Well now, he drawled, recovering quickly. What have we here? Katherine leveled the shotgun at his chest. Get out of my house. The man smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. Your house, that's interesting. Word is this place belongs to Marshal Zimmerman. His eyes narrowed. And you would be someone who knows how to use this shotgun, Katherine replied, her voice steadier than she felt. I won't ask again. Get out. The man chuckled, seemingly unconcerned by the weapon pointed at him. You must be the wife we've been hearing about, Zimmerman's new bride. He took a step closer. He didn't mention how pretty you are. Stay back, Katherine warned, cocking the shotgun with an ominous click. Now, the man said, raising his hand slightly. No need for that, I just came to leave a message for your husband. His smile turned cruel. Ted Harmon sends his regards. Katherine's blood ran cold. This was one of the Harmon gang. Owen isn't here. I can see that, Harmon replied, but he will be, and when he finds what I've left for him, he'll come looking for us. That's the plan. With dawning horror, Katherine realized what he meant. I'm not going anywhere with you. Didn't say you had a choice, madam, Harmon said, his hand moving suddenly to his belt. Katherine didn't hesitate. She pulled the trigger. The blast was deafening in the small room. Harmon was thrown backward, crashing into the bookshelf behind him. Books and splinters of wood rained down as he slumped to the floor, a look of shock frozen on his face. Katherine stood rooted to the spot, the smoking shotgun still clutched in her trembling hands. She had just killed a man. The reality of it washed over her in waves of disbelief and nausea. She was still standing there when the front door burst open and Owen rushed in, gun drawn. He took in the scene in an instant. Katherine, pale and shaking, the shotgun in her hands, Ted Harmon, dead on the floor amid the wreckage of the bookshelf. Katherine, he breathed, holstering his weapon and moving to her side. Are you hurt? She shook her head mutely, unable to tear her eyes from the dead man. Owen gently took the shotgun from her rigid fingers. It's all right, he said softly. You're safe now. The simple words broke the spell. Katherine turned to him, her composure crumbling. He was going to take me, use me to get to you. Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as the first sobs shook her body. You did what you had to do, he murmured into her hair. I'm so sorry I wasn't here. For several minutes they stood like that, Katherine drawing strength from Owen's solid presence. Finally, her sobs subsided and she pulled back slightly. The sheriff is fine, Owen assured her. I checked on him first, he's sleeping. Katherine nodded, relief washing over her. Then she remembered. The other Harmons captured or dead, Owen told her. Donovan and I tracked the last two to an abandoned cabin south of town. They put up a fight, but it's over now. His gaze returned to Ted Harmon's body, all except for him. He must have doubled back to town while we were occupied with the others. He knew about me, Katherine said, her voice steadier now. About us, he said he came to leave a message for you. Owen's expression hardened, and instead you left one for him. He cupped her face gently. You saved your own life, Katherine, and probably mine and Taylor's too. The next few hours passed in a blur. Deputy Donovan and several other men arrived to remove Harmon's body. The sheriff was transported to Mrs. Fulton's hotel, where a room had been prepared for him until a doctor could arrive from Silverton. Through it all, Owen remained at Katherine's side, his presence a steady anchor as she gave her account of what had happened. No one questioned her actions in the territories. Self-defense was not only understood but expected. By evening, Katherine found herself sitting on the porch of the small house, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm air. Owen joined her, handing her a cup of tea laced with something stronger. For the nerves, he explained, settling beside her. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as normalcy gradually returned to Willow Creek. Lights appeared in windows, people ventured out onto the streets, voices called out greetings. Life continuing despite everything. Sheriff Taylor said something strange, Katherine finally said. Before you returned, Owen glanced at her. What was that? He said he'd never seen you look at a woman the way you look at me. She turned to face him. What did he mean by that, do you think? Owen's gaze dropped to his hands. Taylor's been delirious with fever. Is that your answer? Katherine pressed, emboldened by the events of the day and the whiskey in her tea. Because I've been thinking about our arrangement, Owen, about what happens next. He looked up, his expression guarded. I meant what I said when we first married. When this is all settled, if you want an annulment, what if I don't? Katherine interrupted. What if I want a real marriage instead? Owen stared at her, clearly caught off guard. Katherine, you don't owe me anything. What I did, this isn't about debt, she said firmly, or gratitude, or even what happened today with Ted Harmon. She set down her cup, gathering her courage. It's about the way my heart races when you enter a room, the way I couldn't breathe when I thought you might be hurt. The way I've come to care for you." Owen's expression softened, hope replacing caution in his eyes. "Katherine, let me finish," she insisted. "When we married, it was for protection, a business arrangement, but these past 2 weeks I've seen the man behind the badge. The man who rides through the night to make sure I'm safe, who makes me breakfast and respects my choices, who looks at me like—" She faltered, suddenly uncertain. "Like you're the most precious thing in the world," Owen finished softly. "Because you are," Catherine's breath caught. "Owen." He took her hands in his touch gentle but sure. "I didn't plan to feel this way. When I saw your brother dragging you to that saloon, I only knew I had to stop him, but then—" He shook his head, smiling ruefully. "Then I got to know you, your strength, your kindness, your determination." "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I love you, Katherine Zimmerman," Owen declared, his voice rough with emotion. "I think I started falling for you the moment you demanded I treat you as a wife, not property, and I've been falling deeper every day since." Joy bloomed in Catherine's chest, sweet and unexpected. "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling right on her lips. "I didn't think it was possible to find love like this, especially not after the way we began." Owen's smile was tender as he reached up to trace the fading bruises on her neck. "Sometimes the best journeys start with the strangest first steps. And where does our journey go from here?" Katherine asked, leaning into his touch. "Wherever you want," Owen replied. "I have duties as a marshal, but I've been thinking about requesting a permanent assignment in one district, somewhere we could make a real home." "I'd like that," Katherine said, imagining a life where Owen would return to her at the end of each day. A life where fear and uncertainty no longer shadowed every moment. "Very much." Owen's gaze dropped to her lips, a question in his eyes. Katherine answered by closing the distance between them, her hand coming up to rest against his cheek as their lips met in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. It was nothing like the perfunctory peck they'd shared at their hasty wedding. This kiss was tender and exploring, deepening as Owen's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. Katherine felt herself melting into him, all the tension and fear of the past days dissolving in the warmth of his embrace. When they finally parted, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I should have done that much sooner," he murmured. "We have time to make up for it," Katherine replied with a smile. And as the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky above Willow Creek, Katherine knew that what had begun as an act of desperation had transformed into something neither of them had expected: a love strong enough to withstand gunfights and outlaws, family betrayal and uncertain futures. A love that had claimed them both, far more powerfully than any arrangement ever could. 3 years later, Katherine stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching as a familiar figure rode up the long drive. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the land that stretched out around them, their land, purchased with Owen's savings and cultivated with their combined determination. At her side, 2-year-old Emma bounced excitedly, her dark curls so like her father's bobbing with each movement. "Papa." "Papa home?" "Yes, sweetheart," Katherine confirmed, smiling at her daughter's enthusiasm. "Papa's home." Owen dismounted with the easy grace that still made Catherine's heart skip even after 3 years of marriage. He lifted Emma high in the air, eliciting delighted giggles, before pulling Katherine into a one-armed embrace and kissing her thoroughly. "Welcome home, Marshal," Katherine said when they parted, using the title that was now merely honorary. 6 months after their wedding, Owen had resigned his position with the U.S. Marshals, accepting a job as sheriff in the growing town of Pinecrest, 20 miles from their ranch. The position allowed him to be home most nights, a compromise that satisfied both his need to uphold the law and their desire to build a life together. "Good to be home," Owen replied, setting Emma down and removing his hat. "Something smells wonderful." "Venison stew," Katherine told him. "And apple pie for dessert." "My favorite," he said with a grin, following them inside. Their home was modest but comfortable, 4 rooms with real glass windows, sturdy furniture, and shelves lined with books. Katherine had planted a garden that provided vegetables for their table, and Owen had built a small barn where they kept 2 milk cows and a few chickens. It wasn't the largest ranch in the territory, but it was theirs, free and clear. As they sat down to dinner, Owen regaled them with stories from town, harmless tales of minor disputes and community matters, carefully edited for little ears. Emma listened with rapt attention, her blue eyes so like her father's wide with wonder. After Emma was tucked into bed, Katherine and Owen sat on the porch, a familiar evening ritual that had begun on that fateful night in Willow Creek. The air was cool, hinting at the approaching autumn. "I saw Jasper today," Owen said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. Katherine stiffened slightly. After his trial, Jasper had been sentenced to 5 years in territorial prison for attempted murder. He had been released 6 months ago. "Where?" "Drifting through Pinecrest," Owen replied. "Looking for work," he said. "And?" Katherine prompted, knowing there was more. Owen sighed. "And I offered him a job, mucking stalls at the livery stable. Old man Jenkins needs the help, and Jasper needs a chance to rebuild his life." Katherine was silent for a long moment, conflicting emotions warring within her. Jasper had been cruel and selfish, had tried to sell her, had nearly killed her, but he was still the only blood family she had left. "Do you think he's changed?" "Prison changes everyone," Owen said carefully. "Whether for better or worse depends on the man, but he seemed humbled. Said he wants to make amends." Katherine nodded slowly. "I'm not ready to see him yet." "I know," Owen assured her, taking her hand. "And you don't have to, not until you're ready, if ever." He squeezed her fingers gently. "I just thought you should know he's around." "Thank you," Katherine said, grateful once again for his understanding, "for telling me and for giving him a chance despite everything." Owen smiled. "Well, in a strange way, I owe him something. If he hadn't tried to sell you that night, I might never have met you." Katherine laughed softly. "That's a rather generous way of looking at it." "I prefer to focus on how things turned out, not how they began," Owen replied, pulling her closer. "And things turned out pretty well, I'd say." As Katherine leaned against her husband's shoulder, watching the stars appear one by one in the vast Colorado sky, she couldn't help but agree. What had begun as the darkest moment of her life had led her to a love she never could have imagined. Her brother had tried to sell her as property. A cowboy had claimed her as his bride instead. And in doing so, he had given her not just protection or a name, but a life filled with purpose, joy, and a love that grew stronger with each passing day. Some journeys, Katherine reflected as Owen's lips found hers in the gathering darkness, had the strangest beginnings but the most beautiful destinations. And theirs was just beginning.